Thank you for joining us for the How It All Works podcast today. I'm privileged to bring to you Sean Moran. We're going to talk with him about the foster care system and how that system works and how it benefits the children that need it, and then also some things that we can improve on it. Sean has experience with the Tennessee foster care system. He's been a foster parent for 2 years. He's had over 10 children in his home, many of them on respite care, just maybe other foster parents needed a break. But he's also had 8 permanent children in his home as well, or semi-permanent. Obviously, the goal of the foster system is reunification with the family, but that doesn't always work. That's what we're going to talk about and what we're going to learn about today. All right. Thank you for joining us today, Sean. I know you're busy. Your services are coming more and more in demand with the end of the fiscal year here. For those of you that don't know, Sean is a personal financial advisor. He has his own company, and he does a really, really phenomenal job with helping people not pay as much money in taxes. You got a background in corporate tax, right?
Right.
So that's something that as a libertarian leaning person politically, that makes me very happy to have him here today. Sean, so we want to talk about the foster care system and your experiences with both the children, parents, possibly even the court system, DCS, all that. Mm-hmm. But one thing we want to do first, we want to establish your background and kind of what led you and your wife down this road to becoming foster parents, and kind of what your experiences have been to get there. So kind of, if you could just start us at the beginning where you guys were like, you know what, I think this is what God wants us to do with our lives, and then just kind of work our way through that process.
Sure. Yeah. No, we, when we got married, we lived in New Jersey, and, before meeting my wife, I kind of thought about it, but I said, as a single guy, it's probably not something that, would be the best thing to potentially. So, busy with work and all that stuff too. So, when we got married, about the first year in marriage, my wife said, hey, kind of want to do this. And so we lived in Northern Virginia, and we went through their program. They called it Pride. I don't remember what that stood for, but we went through the entire foster planning, the training program that you need to do. And
how long is that training?
Theirs was, this is about 10 years ago, 12 years ago. So I don't remember exactly, but I want to say probably like 8 or 10 weeks, about an hour a week. It was usually, I think it was like a Tuesday night for a couple hours, hour, 2 hours a night. And they talk through a lot of things from, what to expect. Even if you had children, it's not necessarily, like here's the things that would be normal in your family, but these kids are coming from somewhere else. So here's the things that you need to know, the history of the foster system and stuff, which one thing that blew my mind was that there was animal shelters before there was ever a foster care system. Kids who had no families, orphans, a lot of them just lived on the street.
Wow,
and
that is
so
sad.
Just to say like that we cared about animals first before children was just blew my mind. But we went through that whole program, and then they said, okay, we're going to find a placement for you. And then we found out my wife was pregnant. So we said, okay, how does that impact? And in Virginia, the answer was, yes, it does. You can, your first child, your child that's born has to be at least 6 months old. And generally they don't want to have children bigger than your child. They didn't say why, or older. They didn't say why, but I assume it's because, if a child comes in and hurts your child, you're more likely to displace them. So I'm guessing that's what it was. So then fast forward another year or so, and it was like, okay, well, we'll do this again. And then my wife was pregnant again. So we had our 4 children, and then moved to Tennessee about almost February will be 4 years. And so once we got here, got settled in, the pandemic was over, and hey, do you want to revisit that? And so my wife and I decided, yes, we'll do it. She's a pediatrician, so she absolutely loves children, loves helping children. And so we said, okay, let's go ahead and get started here. And that's what we did.
So kind of backing up. So, you said you went through your training in Virginia. Mm-hmm. Did you have to do any sort of retraining or recertification or anything like that? And if so, what was the differences coming from Virginia now to Tennessee?
Sure. So, I think coming out of the pandemic, everybody got used to the Zooms. So when we were here, and before it was 2011 or 2012, so technology's better too. The program here was all online. And so it was a similar kind of format where you'd get people from DCS and, others that would explain, what some situations kids would be coming from, what resources you had, what rules you need to have in your home, how you need to establish that, like walk you through, what different scenarios people might be in, what type of children you might run into, whether it's certain trauma that they had or what their experience would be in certain ways to kind of prepare you for things you might come up against. I mean, as a parent, you can never be prepared for everything, but some of the things you can be prepared for, first aid, CPR, that kind of thing. And I want to say it was probably around 12 weeks and, hour and a half or so, hour and a half each week to get through the program. Then you get certified, and then from there they come and they do what's called a home study, come to your home and check out your house, make sure the conditions are good, and, interviewed our children as well. And, hey, do you guys want to do this? Because obviously if the parents are pushing for it and the kids are like, I'm not going to cooperate, then it's something they want to take into consideration.
So what was that like for the kids? I mean, I know I'll get into my own personal background with the foster system here in a little bit, but for your kids, what was that like? And then also just having a stranger come into your home and talking to your children, I would assume in a one-on-one setting. Mm-hmm. What's that like?
Yeah, so we had gone through, obviously, we also sat down with the worker, the person that was in charge of, making those determinations to approve you and say, myself separately, my wife separately, what was your childhood like? What experiences did you have? What was your family dynamic? Did anybody have any issues of this, that, or the other? And so they ask, a bunch of questions to get into that. They do a background check, obviously. Want to make sure that you're a safe place for these children to go. And so, talk about that. And then they, let us know we're going to talk to your children. And to me, obviously, you sit down with your children ahead of this and say, hey, this is something we're thinking about. How do you feel about it? Get their buy-in or see what their thoughts are. And even with some of the respites and, weekend things, we always do a debrief. Let's sit down and talk about it. What do you like? What don't you like? What do we need to do? What do you see as, your experience and so on? So
two things I want to back up to. So I know we kind of moved on from the training portion a little bit, and I apologize for, circling back. I feel like Jen Psaki. So first thing, when you're doing the training, do you have to pay for that?
I don't believe so. My wife handles all that side of the stuff. So I don't think there was a payment. I think like even the CPR and first aid classes that you take, that's included with it. So I don't believe that there was a fee.
And then the second portion, you talked about debriefing from respites and things like that. Can you tell us what a respite is?
Sure. So I think they've gone away from that, but when we first started, it was so like let's say your family had 3 foster children that stayed in your home, as I'll use the word you use, permanent home for the time being, right, for the foreseeable future. There could be something where maybe your guys are going away to a wedding out of state, or just hey, we need a break for a weekend to do some other things. There was a system in which the children could go to another home for a weekend or for a couple of days, usually weekends, and stay with a different family just for that weekend. And so when we first started out, that was one of the things that we did. And we had one weekend we had 3 siblings. Another time we had another set of 3 siblings. So we did that 4 or 5 times. And initially, they made that program still exists, but they had done one where you could kind of bring the kids in as a trial run, like do a respite or do a couple days and then see how it went. But as I understand, they changed that. So that part is no longer available. It's kind of like get the information, commit to have them come into your home. And there isn't really a respite portion now. But yeah, that's what respite is.
Yeah, you kind of see both sides where it's like, yeah, you kind of get a trial run to see if you're a good fit for them and they're a good fit for you. But then on the other side, you don't want, kids need that stability. You don't want them bouncing around, getting tried out and, kind of rent a car or rent a kid situation for, a couple months while you try to figure out what to do with them. Right. It's not really fair to them. So it's, you see both sides there with, the families wanting to see if they're a good fit, and then the kids just need a safe place to be,
sure,
in a stable place. So kind of we'll kind of draw back into my experience a little bit with some of the foster care and different things like that.
Sure.
So starting off, when I was a child, my parents worked at what's called a level 2 care facility here in Tennessee, and what that is, you had level 3, level 2, level 1. Level 3 was basically everything short of juvenile detention. So that's 24/7 adult supervision, a very strict ratio. I want to say it was 5 to 1, if I remember correctly. So that's five kids to one adult in the facility at any point in time, and at least one adult always had to be awake and walking around and supervising. Obviously, when you live in the facility with the children, you got to be able to rest and eat and all that too. So they had the system set up to where people could take breaks. A level 2 facility, which is what my parents ran, and we lived there. I was a young child, my older brother. We lived there with them. It's a residential facility, but it's designed. You're stepping the kids down from level 3, level 2, level 1, and then hopefully you're either getting them back into their homes or into the foster care system and things like that. These are for kids who had possibly committed crimes or anything of that nature, or maybe they come from a very violent background, and you're trying to say, hey, look, like you're trying to show them that that's not normal. But a lot of times when all you know is violence, like that's what you have. So you've got to walk them down through stages, and it can take a lot of time. And a lot of times kids would get down to level 1, something would happen, they'd have to get back bumped all the way back to level 3, because you got to cycle them down, and it takes a lot of time. And unfortunately, with that system, there's a reason Tennessee has a lot of those facilities closed down, because they really just don't work. And they take too much time, and kids just don't have a lot of it. But the goal was always either get them back with their family if the family had rehabilitated, or get them into the foster care system where they can actually have a safe, loving home. Not that their family wouldn't be that, but I hope I didn't come across in any kind of way with that.
Sometimes that's the case. I mean, that's the brutal honesty of it, right? Is that a lot of times it's substance abuse, and it's a shame. It's because the children are the victims of this, and for any parent that needs that, I think, you want to do what's right by your child. If you're stuck in this situation, get help, because it's not just yourself, and it's like, hey, I need the drugs and I'm going to keep going, or the alcohol, whatever it is. There's other lives that are impacted, and so your children are without a home or without your home, right? And the best situation for there's been studies and studies that the best situation is mom and dad in a healthy home. So if you can create that, it's
No, and then the kind of our next foray into, I guess you could say, that area was a place out near Cleveland, Tennessee, called the Shenandoah Boys Ranch. Dad was the assistant director there. The director was a guy we're still really, really good friends with. His name is Joe Crawford. Joe's just an unbelievable man of God, and I hope we can get him back in Murfreesboro one day. I'd love to sit him down here and have him talk about his experiences at the Boys Ranch. But Joe, just in general, is an incredible guy, and his story is insane. But taking care of the Boys Ranch was more for kids who were heading down a bad road, and maybe they had somebody in their life who could intervene and get them out of that. Maybe they just needed to be pulled out of a bad situation before things got really bad for them specifically, or maybe they just needed more structure. And they just needed a place where they could just go be a boy. And they could be around other boys and do boy things, and have that. They had we had horses out there. They learned how to take care of cows. They had sheep. There's all sorts of things. They could go fishing, and they could just learn just be a guy. A lot of them were coming from and this is nothing against single moms, but a lot of these guys, that was their situations. They had single moms, or if some of them just they knew who mom and dad were. They knew their names, but they probably hadn't seen them in weeks, and they were basically just raising themselves.
Right.
So they were in a situation where just one little thing goes wrong, and God knows what's happening to them. So that's what the Boys Ranch was doing at that time, and we had a lot of really good kids. We had some that came through the facility, and unfortunately, there's one guy, to my knowledge, he's still in jail. He went down. He didn't really do anything, but he was an accomplice to a gas station robbery that went bad, and somebody died as a result. And so North Carolina, that's that's murder one for you too. And then we've got another guy who's a Baptist preacher, like complete opposite ends of the spectrum. But that's just unfortunately things happen. And then later on from the boys' ranch, we came here to Murfreesboro, and Dad took over running what's called the Good Shepherd Children's Home. And the children's home was a very similar situation to the boys' ranch. Maybe kids who needed more structure, who were heading down that way. But whereas the boys' ranch was more for teenage boys, the children's home, when we got there, we had Curtis, who was 18 and about to join the Army, and we had Angel, who was 4, and everywhere in between, boys and girls. And just a whole host of situations to deal with. We had one guy, he's actually a shelter insurance agent. His name is Doug, out in Arkansas, and he just needed some structure in his life. And then we had Angel, whose dad is still in jail for domestic terrorism. Like you see just this broad spectrum of where these kids come from. We had kids who came in there whose parents struggled and still struggle to this day, 20 years later, with substance abuse, like what you were talking about. But just giving these kids structure, giving them love. The great thing specifically about the children's homes, I was a little older, so a lot of those kids that are there, I'm actually still friends with, and we get to see them and see how they're doing. We lost one last year to overdose, unfortunately, but her 2 sisters are wonderful, wonderful women. Her older sister specifically is absolutely she is a woman of God in every way, and she's an inspiration in a lot of ways, knowing how she grew up and what she had to deal with. Anywho, so kind of back to your experience. So you guys started in Virginia, came here to Tennessee, had a couple kids in the process. Now it's 2022. You've got that first kid coming in, those first couple of kids coming in. What's that like? What's the kind of those weeks or days leading up to you're now having this complete stranger coming in your home, and it's not only are you having to welcome them in your home, but you're also going to have to, you don't know who this person is for the most part, and you're going to have to parent them and love them and have them be a part of your family. What's that like?
Yeah, so I guess obviously the rest of it was just for a weekend, right? So you just have the kids there for a couple of days, and it wasn't much you're going to be able to do to build structure, because they're just, it's kind of like if you're an aunt or uncle and the kid comes for the weekend, just kind of do the thing. But the first kids that came to us, the one he was just over 6 months old, and his older brother was about 5 years old, and in the past 6 months at that point, they had been in 6 different homes, and the oldest kid was a little bit violent. Well, why? Because I think he was born I think his mom was drug addicted when he was born, and so there was my wife's a doctor, but there's some like regulatory things that happen in your brain when you're born addicted, and I think the same thing for the little baby. And so it was crazy, because you have a 6-month little baby, and you hold him and you kind of look him in the face, and he's just like staring behind you, and he couldn't make eye contact. He couldn't connect with people. 6 months, 6 different places. And the other guy's thinking like, and this is probably not atypical. It's just probably typical, is that, they go to a home. It's like, why am I going to listen to you? I'm going to be out of here. And the 5-year-old, actually about 2 months in, my wife said something to him, and I don't remember the exact context, but he goes, "Yeah, I'll be leaving soon." And she's like, "What do you mean you're going to be leaving soon?" He goes, "Yeah." And, he's 5. He doesn't really have a calendar. He's not paying attention to time. But he's like, "Yeah, right around about this time is when I usually leave." And it breaks your heart, because here's these kids that they just don't believe, like, I'm leaving. I'm going somewhere else. Like, well, you're not yet. But, and it was a success story in the end. Their parents cleaned themselves up, and, we don't get to follow where they are now, but they cleaned themselves up. They got jobs. The father, we got to meet with them, and the father found a pastor that's mentoring him. He's going to church all the time, and like, I'm not going back to that lifestyle. And but just, you see these people that they want to do the right thing, but the things that we think of as common sense and, hey, this is what you need to do, people don't think about. Like, we have to get car seats for our kids. Like, they need a bed. We're just going to throw the 2 of them on the couch. Like, no, they have to have a bed. They have to have a room. And so I think those are the things that, it's not just we're taking care of these children, but to your point of reuniting them with their parents in situations where that can happen. Behind the scenes, there's people setting them up for, these are the things that you need to do as a parent if you want to get your children back, and they're helping them say, hey, you need stable employment for a couple months. You need you need to have a job. You need to have a place to live that's permanent. You need to be able to pay your rent and so on and so on. We're not just going to say, okay, you've been clean for a month. Here's your kids. Now you can live on the street with them, because that's just going to introduce more stress to you in your situation. So here are the steps you need to take as a parent to get your children back. And then here are meanwhile, people are taking care of your children. And it's sometimes an adversarial experience between the parents and the foster parents, because, our goal, our job is like, here's these kids, we're going to take care of them. And the parents' perspective is, these people took away my kids. Like, yeah, DCS did. And in some cases, yeah, I probably deserve that to be happening, but you're kind of the adversary to them. And then on the flip side, when parents like us or anybody else, it's tough to kind of get over the bias of, these people are bad, they've done these things to their kids. Like, maybe they're not bad, maybe they're just addicted, maybe they're just in a certain circumstance that, to try to see them as more human and see them as more, these are people that deserve another chance. And, maybe some cases there are people that don't deserve another chance, but to kind of see it as everybody's best interest, everybody's goal is the best interest of the children. I think that's sometimes difficult. And then, knowing that you have these children and you grow like they're part of your family, knowing that at some point will reunite with their parents, or they may go somewhere else, or whatever might happen. You have to prepare yourself for that too.
That kind of leads into my next question. So, like, what are some things that, and I know we talked about kind of the process leading up, but like mentally, physically, emotionally, because I know you guys recently had DCS relocated some kids away from you guys. So when that next child or that next couple kids, those brothers and sisters come in, what are the things that you and your family are doing to mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all the things, to prepare yourselves and your home to receive those children? What are you guys doing? What's your kind of and it may look differently for every foster family, but what's your guys' routine, process, whatever?
Yeah, no, definitely. It was one of those things where after the first two kids left, and my wife had a medical issue, and she's okay now and everything like that, but it was kind of like hey, let's take some time off. Let's take some time to recoup and everything like that. And then it was, hey, there's these other kids that need a home, and if the number of kids that there were, it was going to be, they would have to separate them into multiple homes if one home wouldn't take all of them. And so, it's prayer. It was like, well, I want to take more for me. I want to take more of a break. I don't want to do this yet, and so on and so on. And, but I just felt God calling, like, hey, this is what we need you to do. And if you don't do it, no one else is going to do it at this point. They haven't identified anybody, so these kids will go to a bunch of different houses. And so just feeling that, hey, sit down with our kids, and hey, here's the situation, here's what we're looking at, and here's what it might be. You have to I think all of us as humans, we're selfish. And I'll point to myself, right? Like, I don't want to do this.
We're all
work,
guilty, yeah.
Right? Like, this is work, this is hard, we just went through something hard. When those kids went back, it was kind of joyful in that, I'm praying for the parents that they keep on the right path and these kids don't end up back in foster care, because that's the reality for some. They relapse and kids go back. And so hopefully they're doing what they need to do. But it's emotional, right? There's a lot involved. And so, like, okay, let you jump right back in. I guess for anybody who hasn't been in that experience, it's kind of like you're dating somebody, right? You're dating somebody, you're like, hey, maybe this is the one, and then it doesn't work out. And it's not exactly the same, but it's kind of a feeling of loss. You have a sense of loss. Or even if it was a situation where, like, hey, I know this wasn't the right person for me, you still had a relationship with somebody, and now you've lost them. Yeah. Right? So you go through that loss, you go through that, and sometimes it's, well, I'm going to do it again, or I don't want to do it again. It's not the same as you meet somebody and get married because, well, I want to get married, and that's a goal. So I got to try this whole thing again, even though I was hurt. This is a situation like, well, I don't have to do this again.
Yeah.
Right. So to do it again was, it's prayerful. And I was like, okay, my wife was saying, this is what I think God wants us to do. And I'm like praying and everything. Like, I think you're right. Even though I didn't want to do it. And so when the kids came in, you're right. There's adjustments. Like these kids come into your house. One thing that you have to be mindful of is, for you, it's like, okay, here's my house, come on in. But for these kids, it's like, these are strangers, and just kind of recognize that they're looking at you like, you, your spouse, and your kids are all comfortable because this is our home. These people are coming in, these children are coming in as, how do I know you're safe? How do I know like what's happening next? Am I staying here for a while? Am I going to be with you guys? The last group of kids asked us a bunch of times, like, are you going to adopt us one day? And a lot of the answers was, we don't know. We're going to keep you here as long as we can. And, we care about you and so on and so on. And to your point you made earlier, the worldview of these children is what they've experienced.
Yeah.
Just like all of us,
That's
right?
all
Like,
they know.
I haven't been in the military. You have. Thank you for your service. But like, I don't know what it's like to go on a ship or go to another country knowing that I could be attacked. Like, I have no idea what that's like, right? So, I'm walking around the streets. I don't think that could happen. My uncle was in Desert Storm, and he told us a vivid story about. So he knows what it's like to be. If he hears a gunshot, it kind of like, freaks him out, or like a car crash or whatever, a noise that I don't have that experience, right? So I don't know exactly what these kids are experiencing, but I have to take that step back and give them that space to, one, welcome them into my home, but not say like, hey, here immediately, here's the things that you need to do. And like, how come you're not getting it like my children who I've raised from day one and already know what the rules are, right? And still they do the wrong things, right? But, to help them understand, like, here's the rules, here are the things, and just help them understand that their experience, what their life was before, is not everybody. It's not everybody's
In
parents.
fact, it's abnormal. It's
Right.
incredibly abnormal to be in foster care.
Right.
Like, so teaching them that the way they grew up is, one, so far below the expectation of our society that we have now hired government agencies to come in and remove them from that situation, because the standard that they were either being raised to, being taken care of, is so far below that even us living in one of the freest societies in the world has said that's too much.
Right.
That, and obviously you don't explain it to a kid that way. But at the same time, how do you go around and teach them that that's not okay, that that's not normal? How are you supposed to do that when they're going from home to home to home to home to home, right, for one reason or another? It could be poor fit, and that kind of leads me into my next question a little bit. Is like, I know we kind of talked about it with the respite stuff, where for lack of a better term, it's kind of could be used as a little bit of a trial. Is there any sort of vetting or anything like that where it's like, or is it just as far as would this kid be a good fit for this, to go to this home or to this home or to this home? Is and obviously siblings staying together, that kind of goes without saying. They want to try to keep the siblings together as much as possible. But as you know from experience, and we'll talk about that a little bit. I know we don't want to get into too much detail. Like, right, one sibling might not be a good fit for this home, but the other 2 or 3 or 4 might be. So then, how does DCS then have to handle that situation? Is there any sort of vetting, personality screening, whatever, however people want to call it, looking at their Enneagrams, I don't know, to see what child would fit where?
I don't think it goes, and again, I'm not on the DCS side, but I don't think they do that. I think it's more of here's a list of foster parents we have, what people will say, yes, we'll take these kids. Because I think there's not enough, I know there's not enough foster parents. And so a lot of times it's, hey, we have these kids, can you take them? Here's the situation. And it's really important too, as a parent, to ask additional questions to understand what the situation of the child is, right? And to understand if you can handle that situation, right? Because not all of them, we like to think, kid in a home and just like our family, and then they remove them for some reason, and this kid wasn't impacted at all by the situation. But no, they're coming with their baggage just like we had, and oh my gosh, I've just been taken away from the only people that I know, or it could be this is the ninth house. I'm not engaged in whatever you have to say because I know, kind of like that kid, it's about time for me to leave now, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's more of the list of people and who's eligible, like who has an open home, and sometimes it's, hey, you have 4 foster kids, but can you take 2 more, or hey, here's the scenario. And I have found that they try to give you as little information as possible because they don't want to give you anything that's going to make you say no, because we all know about Isaiah 117 house.
Yeah.
That's a temporary situation for children that come into DCS custody. They can stay at that house for a couple days, but the idea is that they're staying there rather than sleeping in the DCS office. So the DCS people have to find them. It's not like they go to Isaiah house and they stay there for 3-6 months. It's come for a couple of days while we find you a place. And so the DCS workers then, who are overloaded and they have way too many cases, and that's unfortunate, they have to quickly find a place for these kids to be. And sometimes it's well, I'm not going to tell you that this kid would do this or that or the other, and as a parent, you want to ask those questions. So what happened at the last house that they were at? How come they're moving? What was their parents' experience in there? Do they have any medical issues? Do they have, ask the questions that you need to ask to feel comfortable that, you're going to be able to handle the situation, because the last thing you want is for a child to come into your house. Like, to me, it would be better to say, no, I'm not going to take the child, than to bring them in and then a week later be like, yeah, I'm not going to do this. Right. So think through, like, hey, well, with the one kid, hey, he's got some anger issues. Okay, well, I'm going to talk to my children about this. We're going to talk about that. And if there's issues, we're going to handle it. But then also, the other part you have to do as the parent is you got to treat him the same as your children. So one time he hit one of my kids, and I'm like, why did you do that? And then just like the other guys, like, well, they can kind of, if you guys can work this out yourselves, go ahead. But I have to treat him the same as one of my other children. Like, as a dad, like, this kid hit the other kid. It's not like, why did you hit my kid? Like, you're my kid too.
Yeah.
And you have to have that mentality, even though inside you might be thinking, this kid hit my kid. I have to treat him as though he's my kid too. I'm like, why did you do that? What's going to get to the bottom of it? But knowing that they don't have your perspective, one of the things you can't do, I think, is go, have a kid come in your house, tell them, like, well, here's all the real things, the way the world really works. Yeah. You have to build trust. You have to create a scenario to them where they're even going to listen to you. Yeah. Right? Like, if you meet somebody for the first time, or anybody watching or listening to this, they don't know me. Just because I said something on a podcast doesn't mean anything until we spend time together and say, hey, this guy did do this, I'm going to turn to this person for, some thoughts or whatever, whether it's be in our career or whatever. We have to establish that trust. We have to establish that reputation. And for these kids, they don't know either that you're not the one who took them away from their parents. Yeah. Right. Like, even, again, I won't get into the situations, but both of the situations, these kids came from scenarios that were terrible that, we wouldn't want any kid to go through, but to them, that's normal. I had, the second set of kids that we had, after a while, one of them asked me, do you think what our parents did was wrong? And I had to say, yes, I do. But I couldn't go in day one and be like, hey, your parents are evil, terrible, horrible people. Not necessarily picking my words here, but just kind of saying, like, your parents did it all wrong.
Yeah, there would be much more choice words.
Right, exactly. But you can't, even if it was, you're evil, horrible, terrible, they deserve to be locked up and thrown away the key. Like, even for a scenario like that, you can't tell that to these kids because that's their parents, right? It's you want to build a relationship, help them see what a normal, if anybody's normal, a normal family is like, and then let them come to you with the questions and build that trust so that they feel comfortable telling you something. And a lot of times they would come to you and be like, hey, I want to tell you something. Are you going to tell other people? Well, we might have to. I'm not going to tell you no and violate your trust and then go tell tell the DCS worker, but if you tell us something, we're going to take you seriously. We're going to have a conversation. Yeah. We're a person of trust. but we probably will have to tell them, and that's okay. It's a good thing for that information to be shared.
Yeah.
So don't worry about that. But I I do want to foster a situation in which you feel comfortable coming to us.
Yeah. So back to kind of the beginning of what you were saying there, kind of the relationship between foster parents and DCS. And so what I want to talk about right now is kind of, for lack of a better term, foster parent and foster child support. So as the foster parent, what type of support are you getting from DCS? You mentioned Isaiah 117 House. Are there any other NGOs, nonprofits, even churches that have support programs for foster parents? If so, when you go through your training, are you told about those? Do they put you in contact with these organizations? Are there any support programs or anything like that for your kids, not just the foster kids? Because they're, having somewhat been in a situation where I've got to share my parents, essentially,
Right.
I can tell you it's a little unique and it's a little challenging.
Right.
So is there anything there for you guys, and how does, kind of that DCS relationship work? What kind of support are you getting from them? I know, and I could be wrong, but my understanding also is, you get a stipend from the state as well.
Right.
How does that work? And, all these, if you could just kind of go through that support structure and that support program.
Sure. So yeah, so they have people that come to your house to make sure that knives and guns and blah, whatever all over the place, and there isn't like live electrical wires and whatever. Make sure your house is safe, right? So people come probably once a week.
Okay.
To do that, and then they talk to the children, pull them aside one by one. And obviously, I wasn't in that meeting, but I'm assuming they're asking them, "What was your week like? How do you feel? Do you like being here? Do you like the people? Whatever." So they have. So the way the system in Tennessee works is you can, as a foster parent, work directly with DCS, or there's other agencies that are contracted by DCS to facilitate the system, right? So, that organization can be kind of like the middle ground. Kind of
Is
thing.
that kind of
DCS
like how you
hires them.
have like the Methodist Adoption Center? Is it kind of like that?
It's more like, I don't want to necessarily say their names because the experience with the ones we had weren't the best, but you'll see signs if you drive around town, "We need more foster parents, call this number." So a lot of times that's the agencies. And so what'll happen is if you work directly with DCS, then, to the point of the stipend, they give you a stipend directly from DCS, and the DCS workers would come in and meet with you as the parents, meet with the kids. If there's issues or whatever, they'll talk about those with you or with the kids. We worked with two different agencies for the kids that we had. And so the agency people will come to your house. And so basically it's kind of like DCS is outsourcing to these different agencies because their workload's too much for the people that they have. I don't know that there's a difference in how much you get from working with an agency versus DCS, but essentially, it's obviously from a taxpayer perspective, there's more taxpayer dollars going to pay the agency because the agency's got to make some money, and then they have to and in those situations, you get paid the stipend for the kids from the agency. And so that's to cover their food, their clothing, and extracurricular activities, and so on and so on.
Is there any mental health support for them?
Not very good.
Not very
so
good.
We actually had, my wife called 20 some, maybe even 30 places to get the kind of care that these children needed from, so that one set of foster children needed, specialty care, and it's not very available.
And that specialty therapy, not just like
therapy.
General, pediatrician health stuff.
No. So this is more like psychology kind of, like counselors that they can go, licensed counselors to go sit down with and work through the issues that they had, right, and the things that they experienced in their lives. So my wife had called 20-something, maybe almost 30 places to find out, like, hey, do you do this care? And found one in Franklin. And so every week she would drive the kids to Franklin and back, every Thursday. So they had to leave school early, take them out to Franklin, bring them back. And so
who was paying for that?
The the state will pay for it.
Okay, good.
But
good.
it was, you know,
But it's up to
there
you
wasn't
guys to
like,
go find
there
it.
wasn't like a, hey, here's a list of
Yeah.
of people that will do this, and don't worry, we'll coordinate all of it. It was, we had to coordinate it, or they weren't going to get that help,
Mm-hmm.
and they really needed it. So I don't think every child will have a particular need in that area, but that was something that I wish that they had more of a support system for. The first agency, when the kids had the two boys had like visitation, the person would come and get them and drive them to meet with their parents and stuff like that. And so I think it varies by agency, but they're overworked, understaffed, and maybe underfunded. I don't know, but I would imagine. So a lot of it is you know, finding the resources they need themselves. And to me, you know, you're getting the stipend, and I think, you know, one thing that they have you do is each child gets $1 a day as an allowance, and so you're supposed to keep track of that. And then, you know, the other thing you can do is if they go to a store, you can say, okay, that's coming from your allowance.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe people do that, maybe they don't. But, you know, I think that's a very valuable way to teach them about money, is have them, here's your allowance. And then other times, like, I want a pack of gum. Like, all right, we're just buying that for you.
Yeah.
Just like I would do for my kids. Like, I'm not going to take this out of your allowance, but sometimes, hey, we're not getting that, but if you want it, you can get it from your allowance. Of course, other times it's like, no, you're not getting that. So they each get $1 per day. There's also,
And that comes from the state?
yeah, so that, well, that comes from the, you know, here's your money per month for the child. And usually it was every other week they would give you a check. And so my fear is there's probably a lot of people that we were told there's not a lot of people with our means that are fostering children. So I would encourage people that have more money or have like middle class or above foster, because a lot of these kids are in homes with people that are doing this because it's a paycheck. And again, probably a lot of them are doing a great job, but there's probably a lot of them that take on way too many kids because it brings them money that they can then live on. And you know, maybe that's pros and cons. You decide whether that's a good thing or not a good thing. But I would like to see more people that are doing this out of their heart, as opposed to, hey, I need the money. Because then from there you could say, hey, you know, whatever the number is, maybe let's say $1,000 a month per kid, plus or minus that. I would imagine just around that. You know, you can just say, okay, well, I gave them their $30 for the month, and you know, maybe I fed them on 500, and I'm going to keep the other 500. Or you can say, hey, I want to add more of that to what they're doing. Like, so a couple other things, like, you know, can you mention places that have helped, or should I kind of mention?
Yeah.
So Harris Riding Academy, they're a horse stable down off of 96. They allowed the foster kids to come and do horseback riding as an activity.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
they didn't charge anything for that. So shout out to them. They're great people there. There's another ministry called, I think it's Bridge Ministries. They do for the foster parents, like one Friday night a month, where you can go, foster kids and your own kids can go, and different churches host it.
Okay.
And so, you know, you can drop the kids off, and mom and dad can go out and have a night out for a couple hours, right? To help keep your sanity. So
Yeah, decompress a little bit.
right. So you can, you know, so they're doing that. I think they're funded, like the churches open their doors to let them have. So it's at this church this month, and another church another month, and so on. So if other churches want to do that, then I encourage them to reach out to them. And then
And that's Bridge.
Bridge Ministries. Yeah.
Okay.
So they're doing that. And then, you know, there's some, I think it's like there's Samaritan's Closet. I might have the name wrong, but there's a lot of clothing places where the kids can go and they can pick out clothes that they want. Okay. You know, either donated new or maybe.
Yeah, because I doubt they're either, you know, when they're getting pulled out of their house, I doubt they're emptying their drawers.
Well, yeah, I mean, the first kids came with, I think, like a bag and, you know, here's some diapers and whatever, like just enough that you can probably fit. And, you know, you didn't even plan, you just throw it in your car, you'll fit it. And the other kids came with, you know, big tubs, but they had gone from their parents to a neighbor and then into the foster care system. And so they had boxes of stuff. But it was funny when they came, you know, they probably each had like 2 or 3 of those like plastic totes you can buy at Walmart, like the big ones. When they left, it was like 5 each. So the people had to come and, like, you know, empty your SUV, put the seats down, fill everything in twice, and then come pick the kids up. after
That's
that.
a good thing though. Give the kids a little more sense of identity.
Yeah.
These are my clothes. This is for me, even though, and that's something that carries through if they're in a situation where it's like, hey, we're going to kind of bounce, they're getting bounced a little bit, but they have, these are my clothes. This is for me. This is what I wear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It kind of helps. It probably help keep them grounded a little bit, even through the chaos.
Yeah.
And it is chaotic. So what, so you mentioned Bridge Ministries as, they'll take your kids and the foster kids. Is there anything that's, specifically geared towards your kids or specifically geared towards the foster kids? I know we talked about the horseback riding and, specifically geared towards the parents.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably stuff you can go out and find because
Okay.
we found some of those just in the community. And there's an app also, I can't remember the name of it, but you can download this app. And so you'll get discounts at, amusement parks or whatever and stuff
Okay.
like that. That's for foster parents, for foster families. I think one of them was, I can't remember the name. It was like some science center in Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
There might have been a discount for that, but it's almost like a Groupon type of thing. You can look and see the discounts that are available to foster families, and then a lot of it's just find resources yourself, kind of thing. So our children, we go to New Vision now, and so they have a counseling ministry, and so our kids went and talked to the hey, how's it with the foster kids? How's your experience? How's this and that, and so on. So they did that for about a month or two, and that was helpful. So yeah, I encourage that. I encourage families to have their own kids as well to make sure your children know how important they are to you, because sometimes where it's if your kids have everything, no kid has all figured out, but like figured out their life's kind of going on on autopilot, and this other kid needs something else. That you have to pay more attention to them with a certain thing, or you have to take them for this or that or the other, there can be a jealousy or animosity or whatever. Let them know why that's happening. And then one of the things my wife and I also did was, I took my daughter out on a date once a month.
Yeah.
Hey, how's everything going? My wife would take each of the boys out on a date, once a month. Hey, how's it going? Do you like this? Do you like that? And sometimes, you'll get gripes like, hey, just like, if you sit down any of your own kids, like my brother's a jerk or this, you're going to get that type of thing. But, to let them know that you're listening to them, you're hearing what they're saying, but, also being in a situation where, the other kid's getting attention, and sometimes that distracts from their day to day, right? Like we had one time where my children, and we put a stop to this, my children would be in doing something, and one of the care workers would come over and she's like, you guys have to get out of here. No. Like if they're in a room and they're all playing, you ask us, you can, and we set that boundary. This is our kids' room. My daughter shared a room with a couple of girls. So like, this is her room. If you want to talk to this person, we'll establish places where you can go, but you can't just kick people out of their room because that's their space. It's, we're not going to have that. So to establish that, like, the wrong answer I think would be, oh no, well, if that's what she needs, then you guys need to be displaced. You have to stand up for your children, and you have to make sure that, hey, if this person's coming and they need to talk to this kid, this, social worker or whatever it is needs to talk to the kids. It's not like you're going to, the other children, your children are going to miss out on going to a soccer game. No, we have to be intentional about making sure that their things that are important are still prioritized while also prioritizing the other things. Because it's easy to feel bad for the kids and just kind of, pour your energy into them and, not forget your children, but like, make sure they know that they're a priority.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that also if a kid's violent, that I'm not going to tolerate this kid hitting you guys, you're important to me too.
Yeah.
And we're going to work to get this problem solved. But if the problem can't be solved, you guys are a priority. I don't expect you to be, to put up with this kid hitting you all the time or doing whatever.
And nobody should have to put up with that.
Right. But making sure like you're not saying to your kids like, oh, well, this kid's, I'm going to use the word special, not special, but like this kid came from a hard time, so therefore we're going to excuse it. You don't want to do that either, right? You want to make sure that it's like, we're going to give them the help they need, but here's what's appropriate, not appropriate. And you're important because they'll kind of feel like they're less important. And you don't want your kids to feel like, all right, well, I just have to bend over backwards for this other child either. It, one, makes your children feel less important, but two, it can make that other kid feel, there could be an animosity that's created, and now the other kid feels like, well, these other guys don't like me because, or whatever. So you kind of try to it's a balancing act.
So last question before we move on. We talked about different support NGOs or anything like that. If somebody wanted to volunteer specifically for the foster kids, whether that's obviously I'm sure there would have to be some sort of background check and certification where they come to you so you guys can have a night off, or they take the kids and go for a hike or whatever else, or anything where they're supporting the kids in any sort of way. What's a good way for people to get involved there where maybe foster parents not a good fit for them, but they still feel that burden to want to?
Yeah, so I think stuff like those other ministries, of course, you're going to have to be background checked in any of those things. They told us basically within our experience, if someone else like, Uncle Joe comes and lives at your house, or grandma and grandpa are going to be there all the time, like everybody that's in the house on a regular basis has to be background checked, has to go through kind of a similar process, even if it's like, hey, grandma's going to come for a month and a half and stay before she goes back to California or Chicago or whatever, right? But like the typical, hey, Friday night my kids are going to go over to their aunt and uncle's house. Well, those kids can go as well, right? So that's fine. Within that, I would say I would encourage somebody who wants to get involved to reach out to some of these organizations and say, how do I get involved in volunteering for, which area are they the most passionate about? Do I want to volunteer at a place where the kids can go get their clothing, maybe sort the clothes, get donations in or whatever, or I want to be at a place where they can come on a Friday night and the kids can play. Often it's churches that do that, but reach out to your church or ask them if they don't have a program like that. Where can you connect me with to help in the foster system? That's what I would do.
And I will have some different connections. So people, if you are interested in helping in any way, please comment your area and I'll see if I can find something for your specific area, especially if you're here in Middle Tennessee. I know there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of different organizations that I have connections with. So if there's something there and you feel that burden on your heart, go ahead and either you can message me directly or you can comment on the video, however you want to do that, to get in touch with me. I'll help put you in contact with those people. There's a lot of really good organizations here that do a lot of really good work. So we're going to do some rapid, kind of not rapid fire questions, but just kind of some quick, just little factoids.
Sure.
And then I've got kind of a couple heavy hitters we'll get into after that.
Okay.
So how long do kids typically stay in the foster care system? I know for your experience, you had kids, it was maybe 6 to 8 months was kind of long-term for you guys. Is that accurate?
Yeah. And I mean, the kids that we had last, I thought they're going to be here for quite a long time. It can be, if a home keeps them, and it could be like, obviously the first goal of DCS is reunification. Now there's some times when reunification can't happen or doesn't make sense. But it's like, hey, mom, dad, family, reunify them with them. And then it's, hey, if this is a fit, you can stay as long as possible. So the first kids they went back to mom and dad, which I think was a success story. It's still, you're losing kids that were in your home for a while. The second set was not our choice. But I think the key is keeping everybody safe, keeping them for, you should go into it with, I'll keep them as long as they possibly can. And that's, they asked us, how long are we going to stay here? And we said, well, we don't know. We don't make that ultimate decision, but we want you to stay here as long as you can stay here. And then obviously after 4 or 5 months, more of a question was, would you adopt us? Can we be part of your family? If we don't go back to our parents, will you be our permanent family? And I think just to be honest is like, we don't know. That, kids are okay with the we don't know if you really don't know. it's better not to say, yeah, that's what we want to do, and then leave them disappointed.
Yeah, it is honestly, and I've had to learn this with Jameson in so many ways, but especially kids who come from a rough background, their BS meter, they know exactly who's telling them the truth, and I've seen it time and time and time again. I worked at a summer camp with kids who were from inner cities, and I didn't. Yeah, and that's you only had them for a week, and they knew they were in for a week and out for a week. But I had kids, they'd ask me, they'd be like, "Coach, are you going to be here next year? I want to make sure I'm in your cabin next year." I said, "I don't know, man." And unfortunately, I've never gotten back involved with that. But those kids were awesome. A lot of them were just really good kids. They just come from a rough background, and just get them out of that situation for a week into a place where they can just go be kids. Right. They can go, what we talked about with the boys ranch, where the boys can just go be a boy. They can be in the woods and do boy things. Or on the flip side, the girls, they can, go do girl things, and they can be around other girls and have some Christ-like examples for them.
Yeah.
That was vital. And you would see the difference. They come in Sunday evening, and you can kind of feel that shell on them. But by Friday, and then when it's time to go home on Saturday, they're in tears because they just want to stay forever. Right. And you hate sending them home because you don't know what you're sending these kids back to. But that kind of a little bit leads me into my next question. How often do foster parents wind up adopting their foster kids?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure really. I don't know if I have any statistics on that. I don't think
I tried to find something myself. I couldn't really find anything. And apparently it's, after my understanding is if reunification is not an option, they either DCS will work to get them in the adoption system, right, or if there is a foster family that wants to adopt, they might. But unfortunately, how DCS is, they want to keep their foster families, and right, if a lot of times if those families adopt, they move out of being a foster family.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you we had some respite kids. They were cute little, I think they were 2-year-old twins and a 3-year-old. Oh. And the family that they were with ended up adopting them.
Good. This is more of a heavy question. So I know we talked about at the beginning when we were talking about the children's home, where you had a 4-year-old girl, and then you had a young man who was about to join the Army. So as kids are aging, and they might be aging through the foster care system, what happens when they hit 18? Because I don't if they're still living with you guys, is the state still taking care of them, or at that point are they just kind of SOL and just on their own a little bit? Is there any support to help them transition, or is it just like, hey, how does that work?
Yeah, my understanding is once they're 18, they're kind of like no longer in the program. The state has the Hope credit and and there's some other college kind of things for kids to go through college, and I would recommend to them, if you're gonna look at getting a degree, anybody, like, just get, don't spend $1 million on your education. The education's the same any school you go to. But there is an opportunity for them to get further education. I know DCS also has a program where they'll hire people from the foster care system into jobs at DCS as they're open. So I think there's good and bad to that, right?
And talk about taking it personally.
Yeah. So the good part is, there can be job opportunities there. The maybe bad could be, well, now, that person's coming to this with all these emotions that, hey, I was that kid. And, so maybe in some cases that's good for the empathy that can be, and then I guess it's a double-edged sword, and sometimes it might be right, but that was the situation you had, but this is different. So I'm sure they go through training and everything to work through that. But, there's some people within DCS, that's their experience is, hey, I was a foster kid and now I'm working. And it's great that they have that desire to give back to where they started. But if a kid was 18 and they've kind of aged out of the system, there's other charities and stuff that will help in certain ways, but they are kind of, like, say, out of the system. And then the family could say, hey, I know I would, if there's, hey, this kid's been with me for 10 years and they're going to go to college, like, I'm going to support them in whatever ways I would do, at that point, they're kind of like your kid almost, right?
Yeah,
So I'll
especially
do
if they've
whatever.
been with you for any amount of time.
Yeah. And it may be, hey, you need to go to community college and we'll pay for it. Or,
Mm-hmm.
you can stay at our home while you're going to this college or whatever. Each family can decide what they want to do, but the assistance that they get from the state, as I understand it, would, obviously would not be the same as for the children. So that would change.
And then, so, so a lot of times, obviously, having a child age out of the foster system is probably pretty rare. I would imagine that doesn't happen too often. At that point, they've probably either been adopted or reunited or.
I don't know. I'm not sure that's the case because I think, unfortunately, most people want the little babies or want the little kids. And then also, I think if you've gone through so many different houses or so many different places, you're going to get hardened. Anybody's going to be, right? Like you're going to, as adults, we all know hey, this person was my friend and they turned on me, or that person, the people, we kind of put up these barriers, these guards, these, or they find that gang or that group of people that may not be the, and it happens for every kid. Every kid has that opportunity, not just foster kids, but, if it's like you don't have that parent there to guide you, or just like nobody really cares about me, I'm not even going to bother. Why would the kid bother coming into your house, even if you're going to be the kid's 14 years old and you're committed to have them there till they're 18. And, I've heard stories of people, the kid, aged out of the system and then they're 20, 22 years old, maybe not necessarily in Tennessee. And then that family adopted that kid as an adult just so that they had that family, right? And it's like, that kind of symbolic, you're part of our family. But, I think at a certain point, it's nice to say, oh, now there's a teenage kid. I don't have to work as hard with that kid. He can just kind of sit in his bedroom like every teenager does, kind of grumpy. But they don't have that same experience. And so, why am I going to listen to you? You're just going to it's going to get tough and you're just going to kick me out to the curb too. So why am I going to even bother? Where's my bedroom? Okay, I'll go sit there. And, I don't know that they don't age out of the system, but I don't know that for a fact, but that's just kind of my thought process.
Well, if they are aging out and they need a place to belong, Uncle Sam's Misguided Children will always take your wayward sons and daughters. I don't know the address for the local recruiting office, but
there's one on Old Fort Parkway.
Yeah, there next to the Gold's Gym. That's the best place to go recruit.
Yeah.
Free recruiting pitch. Birthday's coming up November 10th. So last question, and this one, feel free to take your time to answer because this is kind of a loaded question. If you had one or two or three things that you're looking at, kind of that 10,000 foot view, or even just that microscopic view, if you're looking at the foster system, DCS, non-government agencies, whatever, what are some things that you are like, this either needs to change, this has to change, or, what are some things that you would just like to see done differently?
Yeah, there's probably, like anybody can just nitpick everything, right? But I think more of a collaborative approach, right? Like that the DCS and the agency, if it's an agency or whatever, that they're on the same team with the parents. It doesn't always seem that that's the case, right? It doesn't always seem that and in some cases they're overwhelmed, so it's not their fault, right? So maybe we need more people in DCS. I know at one point one worker actually said, "Oh, I didn't realize that those kids were assigned to me because I have 45 or 50 other kids." And so there's no way that some of them, there were some people on our team that I had never seen.
And are these the people who are going around and going to people's homes and interviewing the kids and interviewing the parents and everything?
Some are supposed to, and they don't have the bandwidth to do it, I think is part of the problem. And then other times it's just, hey, this is what needs to be done. And, to my point of my wife calling 25, 26 different places to try to find, counseling for these kids. Nobody was like, here's a list and I'm going to knock out 10 and you do the other, whatever. It's like, and if, anybody, and I'm not saying it's anybody lesser than my wife. I wouldn't have put in the time to call 26 different places. After 3 or 4 or 5 say no, you're just kind of like, I guess I give up. I guess there's nobody that's going to do this.
Yeah.
You know, so to have more of those resources in the community, you would think like, okay, if kids have gone through some kind of trauma, who but DCS would know what counseling they should have. It's kind of not there.
Yeah, them not having those resources,
You know,
that's definitely a bad look, to be nice about it.
Right. I think that's something that, and then so maybe the people in the counseling world can reach out to them and, but again, a lot of times the people that do that counseling they're impacted by what they're hearing. And the stories sometimes can be horrific.
Yeah.
Right. Like, wow, this happened to this kid or this, or the kid believes a certain belief system that totally makes sense in their world, but is not the way the rest of the world works. It's got to be emotional to go through that. So I can see why people don't do it, but there's a real need there. I think there is that overwhelm, but then also there is some level, probably in anything you do, right? There's, we go to your local fast food store, you're going to get some, incompetence, but there's definitely levels and layers of incompetence that you see. And, sometimes some of the stories you hear of, hey, these people have this number of kids and they're going to put more kids there. One of the things that really disturbed me when the recent foster kids left, the worker that came, she's putting the car seats in and strapping the kids in, and we're saying goodbye to them. And like, hey, we're going to see you again. Again, I don't know. If people let us see you, we'd be happy to. Don't know if they'll let us or not. But they're putting car seats into the car. And this lady who's in charge of, she was the primary person that came. She didn't know how to strap the car seat in. Like, isn't that basic training? I would think. And okay, well, let's give her grace in how to buckle the car seat in. She's putting 2 of the kids that are supposed to be rear facing forward. And I was like, you got those seats in wrong. Well, it's not that. I'm like, stop right there. Don't tell me it's not that far. I know this statistic. Most accidents happen within 5 miles of your home. So you're going to put a kid that's supposed to be rear facing forward. You don't know how to seatbelt them in. You don't know what you're. That should be basic training for, here's how you transport kids. Here are the things the kids need. Here's the age and or weight or height that they need to be where their seats are faced backwards.
Well, most car seats have a chart right there on the side of them that says that.
But you're a person that's working for an agency with DCS where the chance of children being transported by you is there. And then, one time we had kids that went to a respite, and we find out when they come back that one of them was sitting in the front seat with another kid, 2 of them strapped in the passenger seat of the car. Like, I'm pretty sure they told us that in training, but if not, I mean, my wife's a pediatrician, so I know this stuff, but if the kid's 6, 7, 8 years old, they don't belong in the front seat. I think in Tennessee, they say at 9 you can, but really the pediatric board or whatever it is recommends 12 or 13. Shouldn't be in the front seat, because an airbag hits those kids, they're in trouble. It's not, they don't have the structure like we do, and definitely not 2 people in one seatbelt and then other kids jumping around the back. Like, that was the 70s. We're in 2024. That shouldn't be happening today. Like, there needs to be a lot of training around safely transporting children. Like, that blew my mind, and it kind of irked me that, one, you don't know how to do this as the person whose job it is to move these kids, and 2, you're ready to argue with me that it's not that far away. Like, I mean, once they leave, I have no control over it. Then it's on you guys, but clearly you're not going to go and tell these people which way to put the car seats either, because you don't know yourself. That blew my mind. And there was a handful of other things that, but again, you're sometimes dealing with people that you're like, I think there needs to be more training of the agencies by DCS. And then, so that these people are capable of fully doing their job and keeping the kids safe, because that's their job. Like, it shouldn't be that I have to tell you how to keep the children that are in your custody safe.
They should be helping educate the parents.
Correct.
Not having the parents educate them.
Right.
All right. Well, Sean, we went through a lot today, and I appreciate your candor and being forthwith with some of the information. I know these are not easy topics. I know you take these kids very seriously. I know we need more foster parents, but more importantly, the need, just simply having a need for more numbers. We need people who actually care.
Right.
And that's the hard part. But I appreciate you coming in here. It's very obviously these kids mean a lot to you. So thank you for that. Thank you for being willing to talk about that and share your experiences, not only with the kids, with your kids, with DCS, all these different things, all these different organizations that play a role in trying to fill a void. Right. Honestly, I think it was Charles Spurgeon who actually, he had an orphanage for kids at his church. And that was one of the very first orphanages that that England had ever had, because it was just expected. Okay, if mom and dad died, you just go to the neighbors. Right. So obviously our society is very different. If my kids went to my neighbors, I would be very upset. Not that I don't love my neighbors. They just would not do well with my children.
Yeah. Well, and that's why it's important to set up, here's where I want my children. Here's what I want, right, for that to happen. But I would say, I would encourage people, yes, there's hard times. You have hard times with your own children. I believe God put these children in our path for reasons. Mm-hmm. And, even if it's short-lived, you're making an impact on that child that's going to carry with them. They're going to remember you. Mm-hmm. 20, 30 years from now, they're going to remember you, even if you don't see them again. Mm-hmm. And I know a friend of mine in this area who he grew up in a home where he was the biological child, but his parents had foster children. Mm-hmm. And he's a couple of them he's still friends with, 15, 20 years later. So you can be building relationships for your children. It's good for them to see that mom and dad care. And I think overall, it's a great thing. I would encourage people to do it. But, of course, it's not going to be without struggle.
Of course. Absolutely. Well, thank you for your time. We'll see you later.
All right.
Thank you for listening to another episode of How It All Works podcast. You can find us on any major podcast network. We're also on YouTube. Smash that follow, smash that like button, smash that subscribe button. We'll see you on the next one.